Today I want to show you guys how I made this beat. I know it's been a little bit since I've been able to make one of these tutorial videos, but I really wanted to show you guys how I've been making my indie rock, indie pop type of beats recently. There's a lot of new tips and tricks that I've learned when making these beats that I'm really excited to show you guys. Now, when it comes to making beats like this, I'd say there are two things of utmost importance, and I'm going to talk about everything, but the two things that I always focus on when making these types of beats are the drums and any textures or ambient layers. The more layers that you have, you know, in beats like this, I think it helps to make them sound more full, more dreamy. But I love adding a lot of layers when it comes to beats like this. And like I said, I'm gonna break everything down so you'll be able to see everything that went into this beat. But going back a step, let's start with the drums. So when it comes to beats like this, I really think that the drums are like one of the most, you know, driving factors of the beat. When I think of indie rock or indie pop or bedroom pop beats, a lot of them I think have a really steady drum beat. It doesn't have to be anything like crazy or in your face, as long as it has a good rhythm, a good consistent groove to it. So this was the first drum beat that I came up with. It's super simple: kick drum, snare drum, and a hi-hat sound. And they're very like retro sounding. If you guys want to look up sounds like this, I know that a lot of these drums are made after what's called the Lin drum. That's some like old school piece of technology that had a lot of drum sounds like this. And this was the drum pattern that I came up with. Once I had those drums, then I come up with the chords, and I knew for this beat I wanted to make something, you know, that the chords were kind of emotional sounding, kind of, you know, give off a lot of feeling. So I first came up with this pad sound that's basically just 4 chords, but you can see instead of it just, you know, the chord coming in on every single beat, I guess they come in a little bit early, a little bit before, just to give it a little bit of swing, a little bit of a different rhythm. And these were the chords that I came up with. And again, the sound that I chose, I wanted to go for this really like warm sound, trying to kind of capture the feeling of, you know, old school synthesizers, people making music like in an amateur setting. And this is what I kind of came up with. After I had the chords like this, for most of my beats, I come up with the bass line just by copying the low end of the chords and just basically duplicating that to a bass sound. And this bass sound, I kind of made it inspired by the drums. You know, when I had those drums and the hi-hat was just hitting over and over and over, I wanted to do the same thing with a bass line. I love the idea of using a synth bass sound. It's really fat, it's really punchy, it fills out that bottom end nicely. I always like to think of music as a spectrum, and if you've ever EQ'd something and used like a visual type of plugin, you'll definitely understand what I mean. But you know, when it comes to a completed song, there's basically a spectrum of different frequencies, and I always try and think of this when I'm making my beats. So on this spectrum of frequencies, you'll have a low end, a mid-range, and a high end. And when I'm making my beats, I always try and fill out as much of the space as possible. I don't really want to leave any, you know, dead pockets and, you know, not have enough stuff in the mid-range or not have a good, you know, low end. So that's why when I'm, you know, choosing sounds and making beats and adding more stuff to an idea, I always try and keep that in mind. So when I'm choosing a bass sound, I like to choose a really like fat, low sounding bass sound that's just going to fill out pretty much the entirety of that low end on the frequency spectrum. At this point, the 3 things that I have so far are the pad, this like old school drum machine, and this bass. I like the way it's going, but I think with that pad sound, I need to add a little bit more depth to it. Just, you know, going back to that spectrum of frequency analogy I was talking about. So that's why layers come in so important, because this pad sound is good, but it doesn't sound really full enough. So I basically took these same chords. I found this key, this like piano sound from Nexus that I love using. Just like this kind of old school, like vintage piano sound, tons of reverb, tons of atmosphere. And I just played the same chords with this.
And
And then with the drums, I also wanted to just kind of beef them up a little bit more. So I've basically added the same type of drums, the same kick, same snare, a little bit of like percussion, just to add more layers, just to, you know, bring some more life into it. I was talking in the beginning of this video how one of the most important things with this beat, or with, you know, these types of beats, are the layers and all the textures and atmospheric sounds. I love adding that stuff to these types of beats. I think it, you know, really captures a different emotion and it just makes it sound so much more full. So that's why I love adding stuff like this atmosphere loop that I had from Arcade. It's just like this kind of repetitive loop that repeats over and over and over. I'll see which sound bank this is in. This is from Aura, which is one of my favorite Arcade banks, especially for like these atmosphere sounds. If you guys want to check out Arcade too, check out the links in my description. I'll for sure link this VST, but this is one plugin that I use pretty much on every single beat for the past couple years. You know, this one sound, I'll play it for you. It just adds so much, even though it sounds like something on its own. It kind of sounds weird. It kind of sounds a little bit different. Something quiet, just something that, you know, sits in the background, but when I play it with some of the chords in the bass line, it adds this kind of, you know, little melody on top, something a little bit that's going on in that mid to high range that, again, just, you know, helps make the beat sound that much more full. At that point, I was pretty much done the verse and I was happy with it, but I knew for the chorus, for the hook, I needed to add, you know, some type of focal point. And I love doing this with my beats. I always try and make the hook stand out and be memorable in something. I want that to be the catchiest part of any beat that I'm making. So I knew one thing that I wanted to add was a synth melody of some sort. And again, I just wanted to add a little bit more layers. So just going down the list, I came up with this synth bass pattern that is just these short, like plucky little notes. And I've kind of been doing this a little bit more in my beats. It kind of provides this little melody that's not so in your face. And it plays like this. And I also added these synth pluck sounds, which are just basically the same the same little notes over and over, but they pair well, especially with that synth bass sound. I also took those same chords and added a little bit more layers. I feel like I'm, you know, so crazy talking about all the layers, but I added the same chords with the piano and a little pluck sound again from Nexus. Two things that I needed to complete this hook section were, of course, that synth lead melody, which I'll talk about in a second, and I was trying so hard to figure out some type of guitar pattern for this beat. I really wanted a guitar section. When I made it, I actually recorded a bunch of different guitar kind of melodies and rhythms that didn't make it into the final version of this beat, but I still wanted, you know, some guitar recording or some loop or something guitar based, you know, just to, you know, pay respect to the genre of indie music. So I found this sound from Arcade that's just this guitar. It has a bunch of like retro effects on it. It sounds like, I don't know, really old school. And again, you know, just that driving rhythm goes, you know, off the drums, off the bass, off the synth plucks and synth bass. So now the synth melody, I guess, is the focal point of the beat, which I came up with this pattern. And then, of course, you've got to add a bunch of white noise impacts, risers. Again, that's just little things, you know, here and there, a little bit of ear candy. The listener might not even pick up on it, but subconsciously, you know, they're hearing it and they're feeling it. And that's why I always add, you know, a bunch of effects all throughout the different sections of this beat. You know, you can see the beat itself is kind of the same thing over and over. The pad, the atmosphere sounds, the drums, the keys, the bass. A lot of these things, you know, just play on repeat, you know, throughout you know, the whole song, the whole beat. But to avoid the repetition, that's where I've added, you know, those other layers in the chorus, you know, add that catchy melody in the hook, you know, bring all these other elements in. Those techniques are definitely going to help your song, you know, avoid sounding too repetitive. And, you know, everything together in the hook, which is where everything is, sounds like this. And that's it for that one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you a lot. If you guys want to see more content, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.